Hi guys, I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. So it's been about 3 years since I bought my first home here in London. And the other day I was going through my old email, deleting stuff, and I came across this email from my solicitor who sent me a list of all these fees that I had to pay upfront so that the home exchange can, go ahead. And I thought back at what a stressful time it was. I had to constantly be in chat with my solicitor, the mortgage broker, and the developer all at the same time just to get to the finish line. It literally felt like all my hard-earned savings that I saved over last few years when I was working, they just couldn't wait to leave my bank account. And if I'm being honest, I didn't quite appreciate how much it's actually going to cost me to buy my first home. Outside of my deposit, I didn't really know of all these different little bits and bobs that I had to pay upfront. So it was a learning experience, but thankfully I budgeted and planned for this purchase very cautiously. I've kept a lot of buffer so that when I had to pay all this money upfront, it didn't feel too uncomfortable. It hurt to pay so much, but it was okay. So a little about my home. It's a leasehold flat here in London, and it was a new build when I bought it. In fact, when I was home hunting, I really liked the area and the development so much that I actually pre-booked this flat before the flat was even built. So what happened was that I initially planned on buying a different flat, but in the same area. So it's basically opposite my current flat. But by the time I went to buy that flat and got to the sales office, it was already being sold. These flats were selling like crazy. So I got a little upset, but they still had about two different 3-bed flats remaining, and I wanted to get a 3-bed, but I just did not like the layout at all. And I clearly looked very upset to the sales guy. And so what the guy was telling me is that they were gonna build their very last flat or building in the same area, and it wasn't in the market yet, but they were happy to sort of show me the design layout of this flat. I got very curious and had a look at the planned layout, and thankfully I really liked it. I actually liked it better than the original flat that I wanted to buy. But since it wasn't in the market yet, there was no quoted price on it. So what I had to do, I had to really push the guy to give me a number. And what he did, he called his manager over the phone. And while I was waiting, he got a number for me. He quoted me a number for the flat that I liked. And thankfully, again, it was a number that I could afford. And this time I didn't take too long. Within just a couple of days, I booked this flat before it was being built with about £500 deposit. It was a little scary, if I'm being honest, to reserve an unbuilt flat, but the developer that we are talking about is one of the big developers here in the UK, and I have seen their other flats that they have built in the same area. So I had a good idea as to what I was expecting. But the good news is when the buildings were up and advertised to the market, these flats were sold for at least 50 to 70k more than I had paid. So in that sense, I do consider myself lucky. But if you were to ask me whether I was going to buy a new build flat again, I might give you a different answer now compared to 3 years ago. But I am curious to know your thoughts on new build flats and houses. Is this something you would consider buying? Yay or nay? Do let me know in the comment section below, and maybe I will also share my experience and views on new builds and all the troubles that I had to go through because they were new builds. But the purpose of this video was to talk about all the fees that I had to pay before I bought the flat. So let's get right into it. So the first thing that I had to do when I showed interest in buying this flat was to talk to a mortgage broker, and they would find out how much I can comfortably borrow based on my salary and the amount of money that I have saved. For this, the developer recommended an independent mortgage broker for me. And to be honest, he was good. He answered all my questions, and he was very patient with me as well, and helped to kind of give me a number as to how much I can comfortably borrow based on my living expenses and my salaries and things like that. And once we figured out how much I could comfortably borrow, the mortgage broker applied and got me a few quotes from different banks for my mortgage. I had to give information like my bank account details, how much money I had saved, my current job contract, how much I was earning, what were my typical bonuses like, and I think I had to supply about 6 months worth of data on this information. And I was finally given two codes, one on 2-year fixed term mortgage and the other one was 5 years fixed term mortgage. And while I was having all this conversation with my mortgage broker, getting all the numbers ready, at the same time I had to start talking to a solicitor who would work on my behalf, represent me, and get all the legal stuff going. Now for the numbers. For the mortgages, I had to pay $999 for loan arrangement fee. Typically, this number gets all added to your overall mortgage cost so that you don't have to pay it upfront. And it can be part of your overall money that you have borrowed. But I think I paid this amount upfront just to get it out of the way. And next I had to pay £200 for lender's valuation fee. Valuation fee is basically for the mortgage lender to see whether the home valuation is in line with the market and their mortgage, since they are giving me the loan against this home. So the total fee for all things mortgage was £1,199. Next is the solicitor's fee, and you'll be surprised to see how detailed these numbers are. Firstly is the legal fee, for which I paid £495, and that gets paid straight to the solicitor for their legal work. Next, we have something called a mortgage fee, but that's for the solicitors, and it was £150. Because I was getting a mortgage, my solicitor had to speak to the mortgage provider or the bank to make sure that my deposit amount gets to their account at the right time, in a smooth manner. So all that communication that they had to do, they have to put a price to it, and that was £150. Next, I had to pay £100 for leasehold fee. This is similar to the mortgage fee, except unlike talking to the mortgage provider, my solicitor has to talk to the landowner or the developer, and that's the amount that they're charging for getting that conversation going. Next, we have something called a stamp duty tax return fee, and that was £90. This charge covers the cost of letting the HMRC know of this transaction that's about to happen. Then we have admin fees, things like ID checking, photocopying papers, storing papers, and they all added up to £203. So the total cost that I had to pay the solicitors to get all this work going was £1,245. So that was the fees that I paid to the solicitors for their work. But now I'm going to quote you the third-party fees, and that's the most expensive chunk of the overall fees that I had to pay. First is the stamp duty tax. This is going to be the bulk of your fee. If you manage to buy a property during the government stamp duty cut, then well done you. Otherwise, this is really going to bite. When I bought my flat as a first-time buyer, the rule was to pay 5% stamp duty tax on properties above 300k but below 500k. And as far as I know, this rule is back in action from 1st of July 2021. And since the price of my flat was between 300 and 500k, I did have to pay quite a bit towards the stamp duty tax. To give you some example, for a flat that is worth £300,000, the tax is zero. If it's £350,000, then you pay £2,500. If it's £400,000, then the tax is £5,000. And if it's £500,000, then the tax is £10,000. So this is the typical range that you can expect to pay in stamp duty tax as a first-time buyer. Going back to the fees, the next amount that I had to pay was £273 for HM Land Registry search and fee. It's an amount taken by Her Majesty for change in ownership of the land. Next, I had to pay £245 to cover solicitor fee for the developers. It included things like transferring lease to me and things like that. Following on from that, I also had to pay an upfront cost for 1 year's worth of service charges for the flat that I live in. And that amount was £1,503. Because it is a leasehold flat, I do have to pay a service charge, and that is quite expensive at the moment. And sometimes what the new builders or the developers do, they get you to pay these fees upfront for the next 1 year or next 1.5 years. So if you are thinking of buying a new build flat, it is just an amount that is worth kind of adding to your budget just in case. So this brings the total third-party charges to £2,021, excluding the stamp duty fees. And if you add up all the fees that I have just mentioned, excluding the stamp duty fees, because that will depend on the price of your home, the total number gets to £4,465. And based on the price of your home, the stamp duty fee on top of this number can get close to about £10,000. Now, a big caveat, all of these fees that I have mentioned, they don't even talk about the deposit that you have to save towards your flat or your home. So all the amount that I have just mentioned is the minimum extra bit of money that you should budget and save on top of your deposit, just to be safe and so that you can comfortably pay towards all your fees when you're buying your first home. So here is a final amount of how much you should ideally have saved for upfront cash payment for buying your first flat. So say the price of your home is £350,000. And if you pay about 5% deposit as a first-time buyer, for example, then the total fees you have to pay is £6,965. And if you add in the extra deposit amount of 5%, then the total amount that you should save upfront, including the deposit, is £24,465. Now, if you change the deposit amount and you want to pay a bit more, say 20%, then the cost goes up to £76,965. But I guess a lot of us are going with the 5% deposit thanks to the government schemes, and there are lots of different 95% mortgages out there. So with that amount, this could be a reasonable estimate for you. But if the housing price is a bit more and say £450,000, then you can expect to pay about a total fees of £11,965, and including the deposit, it gets your total amount to £34,465. So guys, if you are thinking of buying your very first home here in the UK, do let me know if these numbers are in line with your expectations. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comment sections below. But this is all for today. Until next time, look after yourself and your money.